the ship that was called unsinkable. In the early 1900s, the world was changing rapidly. New inventions, massive buildings, and giant ships were symbols of human progress. Among all these achievements, one ship stood above the rest, the Titanic. The Titanic was not just a ship. It was a symbol of power, luxury, and human ambition. The ship was built by the company Harland and Wolff in the city of Belfast for the famous shipping company White Star Line. Construction began in 1909. Thousands of workers spent more than 2 years building what many believed would be the greatest ship ever created. The Titanic was enormous. Length, 882 feet, 269 meters. Height, 175 feet. Weight, over 46,000 tons. Capacity, more than 2,200 people. It contained luxurious dining rooms, grand staircases, swimming pools, Turkish baths, libraries, cafes, and some of the finest accommodations in the world. For wealthy passengers, traveling on Titanic felt more like staying in a luxury palace than sailing across the ocean. Newspapers around the world praised the ship. Some reports suggested that Titanic was practically unsinkable. That belief would become one of the most famous mistakes in history. April 10, 1912. The morning was bright and exciting. Crowds gathered to witness the departure of the world's largest passenger ship. Titanic left the port of Southampton on April 10, 1912. People waved from the docks. Families cried. Passengers smiled and celebrated. No one knew that many of them would never return. Among the passengers were millionaires, business leaders, immigrants seeking a better life in America, families with children, crew members working below deck. One of the most famous passengers was John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men in the world. Another was Benjamin Guggenheim. The ship also carried hundreds of third-class passengers who dreamed of starting a new life in the United States. The destination was New York City. The voyage was expected to last about 7 days. Everything seemed perfect. A near disaster before the journey had even begun. Shortly after leaving Southampton, something almost went terribly wrong. As Titanic moved through the harbor, the enormous ship created powerful currents. These currents pulled another ship, the SS New York, dangerously close. For several tense moments, it appeared that the two vessels might collide. Crew members reacted quickly. Tugboats intervened. The disaster was avoided. Many people later viewed this incident as a warning sign. But the voyage continued. Life aboard Titanic. For the first few days, life on Titanic was wonderful. First-class passengers enjoyed luxury beyond imagination. They ate elaborate meals prepared by top chefs. They listened to music. They socialized in elegant lounges. Meanwhile, third-class passengers enjoyed conditions that were often better than first-class accommodations on many other ships of the era. Children played. Families laughed. People dreamed about their future in America. Everywhere aboard the ship there was excitement. Nobody imagined that death was slowly waiting ahead in the cold Atlantic Ocean. The ice warnings. As Titanic crossed the North Atlantic, nearby ships began sending important messages. Several vessels reported dangerous ice fields and large icebergs directly ahead. Among them were warnings from ships such as the SS Mesaba and the SS Californian. The messages reached Titanic. However, many were not treated with the urgency they deserved. The sea was unusually calm. The weather appeared good. Confidence remained high. Some crew members believed there was little danger. That confidence would prove fatal. April 14, 1912, the night everything changed. The night was cold. Very cold. The ocean looked like black glass. There were no waves. No moon illuminated the water. Visibility was poor. High above the ship, two lookouts stood watch. Their names were Frederick Fleet, Reginald Lee. They scanned the darkness. Hour after hour. Then suddenly, Fleet saw something. A dark shape. Directly ahead. An iceberg. He immediately rang the warning bell 3 times. Then he telephoned the bridge. Iceberg right ahead. The warning came too late. The officers reacted instantly. Orders were given to turn the ship. The engines were adjusted. Everyone hoped the giant vessel would avoid disaster. But Titanic was simply too large. At approximately 11:40 p.m., the iceberg scraped along the starboard side of the ship. Many passengers barely noticed the impact. Some felt only a slight vibration. A few even joked about it. But below the waterline, the iceberg had opened several sections of the hull. Seawater began rushing inside. The ship's fate had already been decided. The terrible discovery. Ship designer Thomas Andrews quickly inspected the damage. His conclusion was devastating. Too many compartments were flooding. Titanic could stay afloat for a while. But it would sink. There was no way to save the ship. The estimate was horrifying. Titanic had only about 2 hours left. The greatest ship in the world was dying. And most people on board still had no idea. The ship was dying. After inspecting the damage, ship designer Thomas Andrews delivered the terrible news. Titanic would sink. Not might sink. Not could sink. It would sink. The iceberg had ripped open multiple compartments below the waterline. Water was pouring into the ship faster than the pumps could remove it. Captain Edward Smith stood silently as the reality became clear. The greatest ship ever built had less than 3 hours to live. The lifeboat problem. Titanic carried more than 2,200 people. But there was one horrifying problem. There were only enough lifeboats for about half of them. Today this sounds unbelievable. But at the time, maritime laws were outdated. Titanic legally carried the required number of lifeboats even though it was the largest ship in the world. Many people later asked, why didn't they carry more lifeboats? Some believed extra lifeboats would clutter the deck. Others thought the ship itself was safe enough. That decision would cost hundreds of lives. The distress calls. As midnight approached, wireless operators worked desperately. Among them was Jack Phillips. He sent urgent distress signals across the Atlantic. CQD. 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 Soon another signal was used. SOS. One of the first SOS distress calls ever sent from a passenger ship. Nearby vessels received the message. Some were too far away. Some failed to understand the seriousness. Some never heard it. Meanwhile, passengers continued drinking coffee, talking, and walking the decks. Many still believed everything was under control. Women and children first. Eventually the crew began uncovering the lifeboats. Passengers were ordered to put on life jackets. Many laughed. Some refused. Why leave a warm, luxurious ship for a small wooden boat floating in freezing darkness? The order was given. Women and children first. Families suddenly faced impossible choices. Husbands kissed wives goodbye. Mothers held crying children. Brothers and sisters became separated. Many men knew they would never see their loved ones again. Yet they stepped back and allowed women and children to board. The empty lifeboats. One of the greatest tragedies of the disaster is that many early lifeboats left only partially full. A boat designed for 65 people sometimes carried only 20 or 30. The crew feared lowering overloaded boats. As a result, hundreds of seats were wasted. While the lifeboats drifted away, hundreds of people remained trapped aboard the sinking ship. Courage and sacrifice. As panic slowly spread, acts of incredible bravery appeared everywhere. Ship designer Thomas Andrews spent his final hours helping passengers find lifeboats. Witnesses later reported seeing him standing quietly inside the smoking room as the ship's end approached. Millionaire Benjamin Guggenheim reportedly changed into evening clothes and declared, "We are dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." Crew members continued working even though they knew death was coming. Engineers remained below deck, keeping power running so others could escape. Their sacrifice saved countless lives. Most never made it out. The musicians. One story became legendary. Titanic's band continued playing music as chaos spread around them. Led by Wallace Hartley, the musicians performed to calm frightened passengers. Even as the ship tilted into the icy Atlantic, they kept playing. Not one of them survived. Their courage became one of the most famous stories of the disaster. The final hour. By 1:30 a.m., the front of the ship was sinking rapidly. The angle became steeper. Passengers now understood the truth. People ran across the decks. Some prayed. Others cried. Many searched desperately for loved ones. The freezing Atlantic Ocean was now creeping higher and higher along the ship. The bow disappeared beneath the water. The stern rose into the air. Everything became chaos. The last minutes. At approximately 2 a.m., the situation became hopeless. Only a few lifeboats remained. Hundreds of people crowded the deck. Many jumped into the ocean. Others held on as long as possible. The lights still glowed. The giant ship groaned under unbearable pressure. Then witnesses heard terrible sounds. Metal twisting. Steel breaking. The ship was literally tearing itself apart. Around 2:18 a.m., the lights flickered. Then darkness. Complete darkness. In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Thousands of miles from home. Moments later, Titanic broke apart. The bow disappeared beneath the surface. The stern briefly stood almost vertical. Then it too vanished into the Black Sea. At approximately 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, Titanic was gone. The unsinkable ship had sunk. The freezing ocean. The horror was not over. More than 1,500 people were now in the water. The Atlantic temperature was around freezing. Death came quickly. Some victims survived only minutes. Lifeboat survivors later described hearing hundreds of cries for help in the darkness. Then gradually, the cries became fewer. Then silence. One survivor later said that silence was more terrifying than the screams. The rescue ship appears. Hours later, hope arrived. The RMS Carpathia raced toward the disaster area after receiving Titanic's distress calls. At dawn, the crew discovered lifeboats scattered across the ocean. One by one, survivors were brought aboard. Cold. Exhausted. Traumatized. Many had lost husbands, wives, parents, children, or friends. Out of more than 2,200 people aboard Titanic, only about 700 survived. More than 1,500 died. It remains one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history. Dawn over a sea of tragedy. When the sun rose on April 15, 1912, the Atlantic Ocean looked calm. Almost too calm. There was no sign of the giant Titanic. No sign of the magnificent ship that had been the pride of the world. Only lifeboats remained, scattered across the icy sea. Inside them sat survivors in shock. Many stared silently at the water where family members, friends, and loved ones had disappeared forever. The reality was almost impossible to understand. The largest and most luxurious ship ever built had vanished on its very first voyage. The arrival in New York. Days later, the rescue ship RMS Carpathia arrived in New York City. Thousands gathered at the docks. Some waited for family members. Some waited for friends. Many carried photographs. Many prayed. As survivors stepped onto land, reporters rushed toward them. The world wanted answers. How could this happen? How could the unsinkable ship sink? Why had so many people died? The question seemed endless. The world reacts. News of the disaster spread rapidly. Newspapers around the globe printed enormous headlines. People were stunned. Some refused to believe the reports. Others cried as lists of the dead appeared. The tragedy became international news. Entire families had disappeared. Some of the richest people in the world had died. Hundreds of immigrants seeking a better life had never reached America. The disaster shocked humanity. The investigation begins. Governments demanded answers. Investigations were launched in both the United States and Britain. Witnesses were called. Survivors testified. Crew members shared their stories. The findings revealed several terrible mistakes. Mistake number 1, not enough lifeboats. Titanic carried lifeboats for only a fraction of the people aboard. If enough lifeboats had existed, hundreds more could have survived. Mistake number 2, ignoring ice warnings. Multiple warnings about icebergs had reached the ship. Some messages were never treated as urgent. Mistake number 3, excessive speed. Despite reports of dangerous ice fields, Titanic continued moving at a high speed. Some investigators believed slowing down might have prevented the collision. Mistake number 4, poor emergency procedures. Many passengers did not understand the seriousness of the situation until it was too late. Lifeboats left half empty while hundreds remained aboard. These mistakes combined to create one of the greatest maritime disasters in history. The heroes. The investigations also revealed incredible courage. Captain Edward Smith. Edward Smith remained aboard until the very end. His exact final moments remain uncertain. He went down with his ship. The engineers. Deep below the decks, engineers kept electricity flowing. Because of them, lights remained on and radio operators continued sending distress signals. Their sacrifice saved lives. None survived. The band. Led by Wallace Hartley, Titanic's musicians continued playing as the ship sank. Their bravery became legendary. The lost ship. For decades, Titanic rested at the bottom of the ocean. No one knew exactly where. The Atlantic Ocean is enormous. Many believed the wreck would never be found. Years became decades. The survivors grew old. Some died. Still, the ship remained hidden. The discovery. Then, in 1985, an extraordinary breakthrough occurred. A team led by Robert Ballard finally discovered Titanic. The wreck lay nearly 2.5 miles, about 4 kilometers, beneath the ocean's surface. The discovery stunned the world. Photographs revealed something heartbreaking. The ship was broken in two. The bow and stern rested far apart on the ocean floor. Personal belongings remained scattered everywhere. Shoes, dishes, suitcases, pieces of people's lives frozen in time. The images made the tragedy feel real again. The mystery of Jack and Rose. Many people today know Titanic through the movie Titanic. The characters Jack and Rose became famous worldwide. However, many people are surprised to learn that Jack and Rose were fictional characters. Their love story was created for the film. The disaster itself was real. Many of the historical figures shown in the movie actually existed. But Jack and Rose did not. Why Titanic still fascinates us. More than a century later, people remain fascinated by Titanic. Why? Because Titanic is more than a shipwreck. It is a story about human ambition, pride, technology, courage, sacrifice, love, loss, survival. The disaster reminds us that even the greatest achievements can fail. It reminds us that nature can humble humanity. And it reminds us of the extraordinary courage ordinary people can show when facing death. The final legacy. After Titanic sank, major changes were made to maritime safety. Ships were required to carry enough lifeboats for everyone. Ice patrols were established in the North Atlantic. Emergency communication systems improved dramatically. Countless future lives were saved because of the lessons learned from Titanic. In that sense, the victims did not die completely in vain. Their tragedy changed the world. Final reflection. On the night of April 14 to 15, 1912, more than 1,500 people lost their lives. The ocean swallowed one of history's most famous ships. Yet Titanic never truly disappeared. Its story continues to live on. More than 100 years later, people still read about it, watch documentaries, and visit museums dedicated to its memory. Because Titanic is not just the story of a ship. It is the story of humanity itself. The ship sank. The story never did.